sources outside of Scripture, but, that is what Lamentations 4:10 is talking about during that time. Now, later on in the future, the same event happens, but in a different situation. Ironically enough, in the siege of Jerusalem. All right, so let's go ahead and deal with, I believe what was that? That was 50, hold on one second. Let me, because I just lost my place. Let me go ahead and go to, that was 54. So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother and towards the wife of his bosom and towards the remnant of his children, which he shall lead. So they will not give to any of them the flesh of his children, whom he shall eat, because he have nothing left in the siege and in the straitness wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in all thy gates. So we know this happens in Lamentations, but it also happens during the time of the siege of Jerusalem, right? The tender and delicate woman among you, which would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for the delicateness and tenderness, her eye shall be evil towards the husband of her bosom, and towards her son, and towards her daughter, and towards the young one that cometh out from between her legs, and toward her children which she bears. For she shall eat them of want of things secretly in the siege and straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in thy gates. And that's what we read in Lamentations. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear the glorious and fearful name, the Lord thy God, then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed, even great plagues, and the long continuance and sore in sickness and of long continuance. Moreover, he will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt which thou was afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee, which we already see happen in all those other verses, Amos, and what we've been reading. Also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, then will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. And again, this is again talking about things that would happen, and we know that historically, if you do any research on the diaspora of the Jews, you'll realize that that is exactly what came upon them. Notice it says the ones that aren't written in the book. So that can go into a whole long subject, but we really want to get to the heart of the matter, which we're getting close to, which is verse 68. So look what it says right here. It says, and ye shall be less few in number, whereas ye were as the star of the heavens for a multitude, because thou wouldst not obey the voice of the Lord thy God. And it shall come to pass that the Lord, that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do, let me start over again. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught. And you shall be plucked off of the land whither thou goest to possess it. Notice it doesn't say off of another land, but the land, because this is occurring right before they're about to enter into the land of Canaan. These are actually the instructions that Moses is giving them before they enter into the land. Now, when they go into the land, what ends up happening? Well, we know exactly what happened. Scripture is very clear on that, right? And history is also very clear. So that was, what verse was that? That was 63, 64. This is the one they like to go to. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. Again, during all the captivities and even after the dispersions, we know that there were Jews in every nation who did not keep basically the old traditions, the old law, the old statutes, none of that. And what happened? They ended up serving the gods of the other nations. We know that constantly we see throughout Scripture during the captivities they're worshiping the Babylonian gods, the Assyrian gods, so on and so forth. I mean, we could go through all those verses. I'm pretty sure anybody out there who's done a serious Bible study would know this about the Israelites, even in Scripture. But even outside of Scripture, the fact that they started dibbling and dabbling in Kabbalah and different things like that and all these mystical things that they started incorporating, things that they had never done before, even incorporating things like an oral tradition, a tradition that goes contrary to the one in Scripture. True or false? G-Con. That was something that they nor their fathers had done because they came up with this whole entire tradition. In fact, even Christ himself told the Jews during his time that they invalidated the word of the law by their own tradition. Correct?
Right. True. Yeah, correct. Because
right.
what we see is that that it was for a witness. The law should be for a witness against them. That's why it was written down. So ain't no oral nothing because you're not going to change this and that. No, you got a written testimony before you did as a witness against you to bear witness when you have not followed the law as it's supposed to be. Go ahead.
And not to mention the fact that they practice the Zohar and Kabbalah and all these weird things. You even have a segment that do some. So it goes into different things. Now, it's not just that. Of course, some of them may even gotten into Zoroastrianism or to all these different pagan religions that were round about them. Some of them even became Muslims, different things like that. Now, this is where a person could say, well, are you saying that the wood and the stone is talking about the Kaaba and the cross? Not necessarily. What that's talking about is the fact that these people, wherever they were scattered, they started taking up the practices of the people round about them. The thing is that this does not occur. This doesn't happen during the transatlantic slave trade. This happens way before that time. Because if you make the transatlantic slave trade the starting point, and I'm not saying all Hebrew Israelites do that. I know that there are some who actually are very well aware of these facts, and they try to reconcile it. But the thing is, this isn't talking about, 64 is not talking about the transatlantic slave trade. What's the context of 64? Again, 63. They're being plucked off of the land which they're about to go into. 65. And among these nations, I just lost my spot. And among these nations shall thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and a failing of eyes and a sorrow of mind, and thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear the day and the night, and shall have none assurance of thy life. In the morning thou wilt say, God, would it be evening? And even thou shalt say, would it be morning? For the fear of thine heart wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. Now, all this is talking about the very things that we see in Scripture. The whole book of Lamentations is about the very things that we're seeing here. The fact that the prophets wailed and cried and despaired over the things that happened to Israel. And granted, the things that happened in their captivity, even the Roman captivity. But this is where we're about to get to the heart of the matter, right? This is the one that everybody's been waiting for. 68. Let's read this. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. I'm going to repeat that again. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Now, I'm going to bring out the historical information about this, because this was actually fulfilled in two separate events physically. In 70 AD, as the one brother pointed out, during the siege of Jerusalem. But remember, that's just the siege of Jerusalem. What about the rest of the land? Well, that's when we get into 135 AD. The failed Simon Bar Kokhba revolt. Simon Bar Kokhba was a man that was said to be the Messiah. He was from the tribe of Judah. Yes, you did have people, contrary to what some of these camps are teaching, that, oh, no, all the Jews went scattering into Africa. All of them, or 1 million Jews. Some of them will read, like, from Babylon to Timbuktu. And by the way, that claim in there is actually a faulty one. And if anybody wants me to go into that, I can. But it's actually a faulty claim, the one that Rudolph Windsor made. Truth be told, 135 AD is the siege that happened, or I should say the revolt that happened in Judea. All the people of Judea from all cities were sold into slavery. It was because of that revolt that, the land actually was renamed. It was no longer called Judea, but it was renamed Syria Palestina by Hadrian. But I'm going to go ahead and bring out the sources for both. Ron, before I go into that, do you want to share your thoughts on this?
No, go ahead, brother. I was just listening to you.
All right,
just to let you know, we're in overtime portion, so we have approximately 20 minutes left of the show. Okay.
All right, man. So I'm going to go ahead and get to this. So first and foremost, we actually have a historian that recounts this. It's in Hieronymus, in Zechariah 2 folio 120 in section 1. This is Jerome. Jerome was privy to information, because he was living in the Roman Empire. He was actually a Christian. He was a historian. And he was privy to all the information that would later be destroyed in history. As we know, the barbarians actually sacked the western half of the Roman Empire, the Christian Roman Empire. And, a lot of those things were destroyed. But a lot of the writings were actually preserved in the writings of Jerome. So he keeps a record of a lot of the things that went down. So look what he says. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up right now because I just had it in front of me. When he talks about, let's see if I can find it. 1 second. Oh, here we go. It says, after the last overthrows by Hadrian, many thousands were sold, and what could not be sold were transported into Egypt and perished by shipwreck. You hear that? Shipwreck. That means these people were coming into Egypt on ships or famine or were slaughtered by the people. So think about the fact that they would be sold on to the enemies, but no one would buy them. Now, the truth of the matter is the Masoretic text says that they would sell themselves, right? That's the way it's written. But you can actually read that verse 2 different ways. A lot of people don't realize that Deuteronomy 28:68 uses the Septuagint reading in their verse, because that's exactly how it reads in the Septuagint, that they would be sold onto their enemies. So the question becomes, how were they sold and nobody bought them? It's because they were destroyed. As it says that there would be only a remnant that would survive. Remember, he said that they would be like the multitude of the stars, but only a remnant would be saved. But the ones that went into Egypt were destroyed. Now, was that saying all of them were destroyed? Well, not necessarily, because you did have people who did survive. But the majority of the people who went were destroyed. Just as the majority of the people were destroyed later on in history, wherever they went, because the Lord kept his promise. He said that he would do this to them, and he kept them very small. That's why the Israelites were a minority. Also, I'm going to bring out something else too. I'm going to bring out some Israelite historians. So let me go ahead and this is Ibn Ezra. Now look what he says. There were such numbers of them to be sold, both at Egypt and at Rome, that the sellers of them had but a poor market for them. And it seems not only because of their number, but the ill opinion had of them as servants. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, but it's Hegesippus. This is another guy. He says, there were many to be sold, but there were few buyers, for the Romans despised the Jews for service. Nor were the Jews left to redeem their own. It is sad. That 30 were sold for a penny, a just retaliation to them who had sold their old Messiah for 30 pieces of silver. Now, let me see if I could find, because there's another one. I'm trying to find this one brother right here. All right, here we go. Now, Manasseh ben Israel, now he says that through Vespasian banished the Jews into various countries, Egypt is, was mentioned as a way of reproach, and that ye shall go captive into the land from which ye went out triumphant. Now, again, I'm going to see if I can give some of these sources because I got them a little mixed up a little bit. But needless to say, as the brother was pointing out in War of the Jews, we know the one that it talks about. Actually, Titus. I could pull that up. Let me actually pull that up if I can. War of the Jews. I had all this right here. But in the meantime, brother, I was wondering. It's very clear that these events actually took place in antiquity. People were actually sold into slavery, just as it says, right? They literally went into Egypt, and they literally went into Egypt on ships. I don't know how anybody who does serious research on this could come away thinking something otherwise, thinking that that's talking about the transatlantic slave trade. They try to make Egypt America, or they try to make Egypt the house of bondage and just try to make it very broad. But the truth of the matter is that the Israelites were being scattered into Egypt and different places, but Egypt specifically because they had just come out of Egypt. They literally crossed the Red Sea on foot. of course he says you won't see that way again. But see, they didn't go back to Egypt on foot. They went back into Egypt through the water on ships, just as they went through the water on foot. And I think those things are very clear.
Right. And one of the things we want to bring out of this is it's really mentioned, how God really brought Israel up out of Egypt by a miraculous hand. And so now they won't experience that miraculous hand of crossing anything, but they will cross back over the way you're supposed to cross on water, and not by God splitting the Red Sea. So it's clear that God was telling them, look, if you disregard anything that he has given them, they were going to come back into Egypt where they started from, where they came out of Egypt. They will go back the same way, or by way of not by God's miraculous hand, but by the hand of their enemies, and not by no supernatural occurrence that they experience. So I think that that's significant that we can actually see that just as well. I want to also bring up something about Vespasian, because they always say, some people always say concerning the ships. It's always a problem. Well, Egypt is right there. Why do they need to take ships? Not realize that these people had ports. There was in Jerusalem, or Israel, and also Lebanon, and all of these different places. They had ports around the Mediterranean, and also through the ports to go into Alexandria, and to these different parts where they were using ships through that world back then. And one of the things that we need to understand about Titus, and also it says, so let's read something real quick. That this is what we call, I don't know if anybody heard about this, but this is the triumph, the vassal. Well, this is from the Jewish Encyclopedia. And I know people got a problem with probably what I'm going to read because it says the Jewish Encyclopedia.
But they don't got a problem until they start using arseneth and all that other stuff they try to use. But yeah, go ahead, man. And then I'm going to reward you after you're done with that.
It says, in the eyes of the Roman people, Vespasian and Titus shared in the glory of subjugation of Palestine. Yet neither of them assumed the title judicious, probably because this term referred to the religion as well as the nationality of the Jews. It says, in addition to the honors bestowed on Titus by the Senate and the memorials erected to his praise, several decrees and monuments refer to Vespasian. Watch this. The coins bearing the legend Victoria Navalis, and it says probably commemorate his pursuit of the Jews at the, I think it's Tarichia on rafts, and the same circumstances doubtlessly explain why Titus brought a large number of ships with him when he entered Rome in triumph. So it's clear that Titus was using ships, and this is from the Jewish Encyclopedia. So if you want to talk about anything that you have for us, history, even the language, you can't discredit these people if you say they're not Jews when you wouldn't have what you have if it wasn't for some of the things that they got. So I just wanted to bring out that's proof that at that time he even took some ships. We even got off into the historical content that we're going to deal with the next time we come on the next session. We got historical content that explains, about the ships and all of that stuff. Go ahead, brother.
Right. So real quick, this is War of the Jews, Book 6, Chapter 9, Section 2. Look what it says. And I'm going to kind of skip ahead because I know, we're pressed for time. So I'm going to read starting here where it says, which Caesar sent one of his freedmen, also Fronto, one of his own friends, which last was to determine everyone's fate according to his merits. So this Fronto slew all those that had been seditious and robbers, who were impeached one by another. But of the young men he chose out the tallest and most beautiful and reserved them for triumph. And as for the rest of the multitude that were about 17 years old, he put them into bonds and sent them to the Egyptian mines. Titus also sent a great number into the provinces as a present to them, that they might be destroyed upon their theaters by the sword or by the wild beast or by those who were under by the sword and by the wild beast. But those that were under 17 years of age were sold for slaves. So this is very clear. You notice that he sends them throughout the provinces, right? Now, do you realize that the way that the Romans sent people throughout their provinces was in ships? Because, truth be told, that's the way that they were able to get people across all over the places. And one of the slave ports that they had one in Alexandria. They had several throughout the Mediterranean. I mean, we know Greece, for a fact, was another one. I mean, they had different places where they would send people and sell them, right? Now, keep this in mind. Keep in mind that this is no secret. In fact, there's actually an article that talks about the Romans. I can pull it up. And while I'm doing that, brother, could you go ahead and, so, you know, there's no dead air, could you go ahead and speak on what we just read over here in War of the Jews? And also what we read earlier with Hadrian, you know, Jerome, who was the translator of the Vulgate and a historian, says that they went into Egypt on, you know, that they basically were shipped. They were sold as slaves, and that many of them died by shipwreck. That's very clear. Shipwreck means that they went on ships. This is well before the transatlantic slave trade, man.
Right. So definitely, Josephus, you know, and I haven't even got off into. We haven't even touched the surface on Josephus. Josephus talks about so much, you know, about the war that they had, you know, on ship with the Jews. I just read a little bit of it. I haven't even read the rest of this. The Jews got so exhausted at the Romans because the Romans was really slaying them. They started throwing like rocks and stuff just to try to harm the Romans. And so Josephus,
right.
I'm talking about he talks about all of these things. But go ahead, brother, because I know you want to bring that up.
Yeah. So this is the on hub pages. It talks about slavery in ancient Egypt. The province, these are the slavery in the provinces, the slave markets. It says the entire empire was a working ground for the slave trade business. Slaves were shipped to provinces and sold at the local slave markets, with some of the providers working also as tax collectors. Now, keep that in mind. That's the way that this worked. And most of the Roman Empire, if I'm not mistaken, a large chunk of it was made up of slaves. You know, anybody can do a little research on that. You can look even on, you know, whatever you want to use, Encyclopedia Britannica. You can look in Wikipedia, whatever you decide to use. It'll all tell you that. And that's the way that they were getting their slaves around.
All right, let me add to this real quick. Now, this is Josephus, again, Wars, Book 3, Chapter 10, Section 9. Watch what it says. It says, however, as they sailed around about the vessels, and sometimes as they came near, they threw stones at the Romans when they were a good way off, or came closer and fought them. Yet did they receive the greatest harm themselves in both cases. For as for the stones they threw at the Romans, they only made a sound one after another. For they threw them against such a were in the armor, while the Roman darts could reach the Jews themselves. And when they ventured to come near the Romans, they became sufferers themselves because they could do any harm to either, and were drowned, they and their ships together. And for those that endeavored to come to the actual fight, the Romans ran many of them through with their long poles. Sometimes the Romans leaped into their ships with swords in their hands and slew them. But when some of them met the vassals, the Romans caught them by the middle and destroyed at once their ships and themselves who were taken in them. And for such as were drowning in the sea, if they lifted their heads up above the water, they were either killed by darts or caught by the vassals. In the desperate case they were in, they attempted to swim to their enemies. The Romans cut off either their heads or their hands, and indeed they were destroyed after various manners. Everywhere till the rest being put to flight were forced to get upon the land, while the vessels encompassed them about on the sea. But as many of these were repulsed when they were getting ashore, they were killed by the darts upon the lake, and the Romans leaped out of their vessels and destroyed a great many more upon the land. And one might then see that the lake all bloody and full of dead bodies, for not one of them escaped. And a terrible stink and a very sad sight there was on the following days over that country. For as for the shores, they were full of shipwrecks, and of the dead bodies all swelled. And as the dead bodies were inflamed by the sun and putrefied, they corrupted the earth, insomuch that the misery was not only the object of commiseration to the Jews, but to those that hated them and had been the authors of misery. This was the upshoot of the sea fight. The number of slain, including them, were killed in the city. Wars of Jews, Book 3, Chapter 10, Section 9.
Right, and real quick, I want to give, because we're giving the physical description of Deuteronomy 28:68. But let's play with their theory for a moment. You know that they say that Deuteronomy.
Unfortunately, there's only like 5 minutes left of the show, guys. We got to wrap it up. Only 5 minutes left, so
actually,
see your last information.
Yes, I'm gonna wrap it up with this one. This is the perfect one to wrap it up with. The spiritual significance of Deuteronomy 28:68, right? So it says that, some of these camps will teach that Egypt is a metaphor for bondage. Well, now if you go over here to, let's look at how Christ is the redeemer of these curses, right? So if you go to Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 through 15, what does it say? And when they had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which is spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt I called my son. Now, anybody who knows this is quoting Hosea 11:1, which says the following. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. So we know that Christ is being embodied as the true Israel, and the Egypt, which is the bondage, which is sin, because sin is the transgression of the law. Christ has come to redeem those who are prisoners of sin. Who does he do it first with? Well, let's look. John 8. What does it say when he starts talking to the Jews? What does it say in 31? It says, Then Jesus said to those Jews who believed on him, If ye continue in my word, then you are my disciples indeed. They answered him, We be Abraham's, 32. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And that's when they answered and said they were Abraham's seed, and they had not been in bondage to any man in that generation. That generation had not been in bondage. But look what Christ said. Jesus answered, Verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin.
You're going to have to wrap it up, bro, because you're going to have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
After the show going to cut off.
All right.
So
I'm just going to say this. All right, I'm going to just wrap it up with this. I'm going to say Jesus told them that he would make them free, and if the Son makes you free, you are free indeed. Galatians 3:13, Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law. At the end of the day, Christ has redeemed those who are truly his from that curse. And that curse doesn't just happen with Israel. It happens with all men, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That is Romans chapter 5. At the end of the day, the only way out is Christ. If you are living these curses every day, you have not been redeemed by the Son. Give your life to the Son so you can truly be set free and be a servant of righteousness and not a servant of sin.